Marcus had never considered himself unlucky, at least not until the morning the Galactic Council decided to ruin his life in the most spectacularly bureaucratic way possible. It began with a minor, entirely accidental catastrophe involving a shipment of quantum potatoes, a misfired graviton cannon, and a low-orbit star that now glimmered suspiciously green whenever anyone glanced at it through a telescope. Quantum potatoes, Marcus muttered to himself, pacing his cramped apartment, are never going to forgive me for this. The universe, he suspected, had a strange sense of humor, though judging by the Council's response, that humor was delivered with interstellar malice. Now, thanks to their verdict, he was being assigned an alien servant. A maid, he groaned, because that will fix everything. The Council's representative was a hovering orb that buzzed irritably whenever Marcus spoke, which, coincidentally, was quite a lot. It had all the empathy of a malfunctioning toaster and the patience of a black hole. "Human Marcus," it intoned, voice metallic and judgmental, "you are hereby assigned Liara, an alien domestic assistant, to mitigate your previous errors and teach you proper maintenance of intergalactic property." It paused, then added, "Do not fail again." Marcus blinked at the orb, trying to process the enormity of the situation. "Mitigate my errors?" he said. "You mean she's supposed to help me not blow up the rest of the quadrant?" "Precisely." He tried not to flinch at the phrase, alien domestic assistant. The thought of having a being from another world at his beck and call felt vaguely terrifying and also vaguely humiliating. When the transport pod arrived at his building, a sleek, polished capsule that hummed and glimmered as if it were laughing at him, Marcus steeled himself. The doors opened with a pneumatic hiss, revealing Liara standing perfectly still in the center of the capsule. She looked almost human. Almost, but not quite. Her skin had the warm, familiar tone of a sunlit afternoon, and her hair fell in gentle waves, but the long, elegant ears arching above her head gave her away immediately. They were expressive, twitching slightly as she regarded Marcus with a level of calm that he found profoundly unsettling. Her eyes, a shade between violet and topaz depending on the light, scanned him with curiosity rather than judgment. "Human Marcus," she said in a voice smooth enough to be considered melodic, "I am Liara. It is a pleasure to meet you. I will be assisting you in all domestic matters." Marcus coughed. "Domestic matters?" "Yes," she said, tilting her head slightly. The ears twitched again, a subtle but elegant expression of amusement. "Laundry, nutrition, cleaning, organization, minor corrections to personal errors will be included." Marcus immediately felt overwhelmed, not by her presence but by the sheer weight of responsibility she implied. He had managed to survive on instant nutrient packs and half-assembled furniture for years. The idea that someone would correct him in subtle, humiliating ways was unbearable. He tried to assert authority. "Right, well, I suppose we should start with some ground rules. I am the human in charge here." "So," Liara raised a single hand, elegantly, almost lazily. "I anticipated this. Please note that your authority is acknowledged. I will follow your verbal instructions. I will also, however, subtly correct inefficiencies that may threaten your well-being or the structural integrity of your domicile." Marcus choked on his own indignation. Subtly correct. She smiled faintly, and the curve of her ears suggested amusement at his confusion. "Yes, for example," she said, reaching for a hovering cup of tea that defied gravity, "if you place this on the floor, it may evaporate or worse, spill in a zero-G arc. I will prevent such occurrences." He watched slack-jawed as the cup floated into his hand, wobbling like a small, obedient creature. "Okay," he said, "I see, that's helpful." "Yes," she said. "I find that humans often underestimate their environment. You are no exception." Marcus's pride took a small, crushing blow. He had survived asteroid storms, solar flares, and one very unpleasant encounter with a malfunctioning AI dishwasher. Yet here he was, being corrected by a woman with pointy ears and a serene smile. The days that followed were a mixture of chaos and unintended comedy. Marcus attempted to maintain his dignity, issuing commands in a booming, official voice that came out more like a desperate plea. "Liara, I need the laundry folded by, right now." Liara appeared moments later, her hands moving with uncanny efficiency as garments folded themselves midair, defying gravity and occasionally colliding with Marcus's head in a gentle, humorous warning. "Done," she said casually, ears flicking in a way that seemed almost teasing. He flinched. Did that shirt just fold itself on my face?" "Yes," she said, "it seems gravity appreciates humor." Even the meals became sources of tension and laughter. Liara, with her alien understanding of nutrition and chemistry, created dishes that seemed to glow faintly and sometimes hummed when they were ready to be eaten. Marcus, who had once considered instant protein cubes the height of culinary sophistication, found himself eating a levitating roast with curiosity and mild terror. This is edible," he asked, poking it cautiously with a fork. Liara's ears twitched. "Edible, delightful, and highly nutritious. You may consider it an upgrade." Marcus sighed, simultaneously defeated and fascinated. He realized quickly that being assigned an alien maid was not merely a punishment. It was an education. One filled with minor humiliations, unexpected lessons in alien domestic ingenuity, and a slow, creeping awareness that he might not be in control at all. Yet beneath the humor and chaos, he could feel the subtle undercurrent of her presence. Always observing, always adapting, always just slightly ahead of him. And though he would never admit it aloud, he felt a strange, magnetic pull toward this tall, elegant woman with long ears who could make tea float, meals hum, and a human ego feel simultaneously inflated and thoroughly humbled. By the end of the first week, Marcus accepted one undeniable truth. The universe had a sense of humor. Liara was far more clever than he was, and somehow the punishment of having an alien maid was already shaping his life into something far more chaotic and intriguing than he could have imagined. The morning arrived with a soft hum of the colony's energy grid, punctuated by the occasional whoosh of a delivery drone navigating the glassy spires outside Marcus's apartment. He sat at the edge of his bed, trying to look dignified while silently panicking about the day ahead. Liara, ever punctual, glided into the room with a fluidity that suggested both elegance and a quiet command over gravity itself. Her ears twitched in a rhythm Marcus had begun to associate with amusement or perhaps mild exasperation at his morning rituals. "Human Marcus," she said, voice smooth and melodic, "your schedule today includes nutrition, hygiene, and minor structural recalibrations." Marcus tried to respond with authority. "Right, well, I think I can handle my own hygiene." She tilted her head and her ears curved almost imperceptibly, like a cat amused by the futility of the attempt. "I would not presume to doubt your abilities, yet the bathroom contains a malfunctioning water regulator, a cleaning solution that refuses to adhere to surfaces, and 3 autonomous cleaning drones with intermittent flight patterns. I suggest oversight." Marcus groaned and swung his legs over the bed, only to trip on a floating sock that had apparently developed minor propulsion capabilities. "I swear these socks are conspiring against me," he muttered, catching the drifting garment before it floated into the ceiling vent. Liara floated a hand toward the sock. It obeyed, gently landing on the shelf beside her. "The sock is compliant once reasoned with, unlike its owner," she added with the faintest hint of amusement. The breakfast sequence was no less chaotic. Liara produced a tray of meals that hovered around Marcus, offering options he couldn't fully comprehend. Bioluminescent fruit that pulsed gently, protein spheres that rotated like tiny planets, and a tea that emitted a faint, musical hum whenever it was ready. Marcus poked at a rotating sphere with a fork, only to have it orbit his plate, narrowly missing a graceful dive into his lap. This is ridiculous," he said, but there was no real anger, only an incredulous amusement at the absurdity of it all. Liara, as always, remained composed. "Ridiculousness is often the precursor to enlightenment," she said, lowering the orbiting sphere onto his plate. "I consider it an important part of your rehabilitation." By mid-morning, Marcus had been sent to reorganize his storage modules, an activity he had previously regarded as optional at best. Liara followed at a measured distance, her eyes sharp and calculating. Whenever Marcus attempted to assert control, she countered gently but firmly, like a chess master who allows the opponent to move but ensures checkmate is inevitable. He tried to maintain authority. "Liara, I think the shelves should go here." "They would be more structurally sound here," she replied, indicating the opposite wall with a delicate gesture. "Also, the placement will optimize gravitational flux and prevent minor microcollapses." Marcus sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Gravitational flux, microcollapses, can't we just call it shelves and be done with it? Liara's ears twitched, a subtle signal Marcus was beginning to recognize as amusement. Humor is, in fact, the optimal response to minor inefficiencies, she said, though your term lacks precision. He paused. I think I just lost the argument, did I? Yes, she said simply, a faint smile playing across her lips. As the day progressed, Marcus found himself increasingly aware of the subtle ways Liara influenced his environment. She never forced obedience, rather she guided it with a mixture of alien ingenuity and charm. A hovering broom would redirect itself mid-sweep, cleaning corners he hadn't noticed. Lights would adjust to optimize reading conditions, and even the tiniest appliances seemed to anticipate his intentions, often with comedic consequences. Marcus would reach for a cup, only to have it float slightly out of reach, teasing him, and then settle perfectly in his hand when he laughed in frustration. Despite the humor, he couldn't deny the tension growing between them. Every clever trick Liara performed, every subtle correction made him both irritated and intrigued. He began noticing details he had previously ignored. The way her ears twitched in patterns that suggested mood, the intelligent glint in her eyes, and the effortless elegance of her movements, as if gravity itself were a plaything she could manipulate at will. The turning point came in the afternoon, during what Marcus had optimistically called a relaxing holographic training session. Liara had set up a simulation intended to teach him spatial awareness and multitasking under zero-gravity conditions, a session he had assumed would be simple. It was. He found himself flailing amidst floating obstacles, colliding with objects that didn't exist a moment ago, while Liara glided effortlessly through the chaos, correcting minor errors with gentle nudges of her hand or a small burst of anti-gravity. Marcus gasped as a floating chair narrowly missed him. This is insane, you're cheating. Liara's ears flicked. I am not cheating, I am demonstrating optimal efficiency. You, however, seem overwhelmed. I am overwhelmed, he echoed, clinging to a spinning panel for balance. I am being battered by physics and alien cleverness. She floated closer, placing a reassuring hand on a control panel. It is not battering if you learn, Marcus. Observe, adapt, survive, and perhaps laugh a little along the way. He managed a weak laugh, realizing she was right. The humor was woven into everything she did, floating fruit, mischievous utensils, perfectly timed interruptions of his clumsy maneuvers, but beneath it all was a lesson in humility, precision, and patience. By evening, Marcus was exhausted yet oddly exhilarated. Liara had prepared dinner, a levitating pasta dish that spun slowly, creating a gentle aurora of floating sauces, and set the ambient lighting to the soothing wavelengths of a distant nebula. He sat across from her, fork in hand, feeling a strange mixture of admiration, irritation, and curiosity. You're really good at this, he admitted, unable to keep the wonder from his voice. She inclined her head, ears curving slightly in acknowledgement. I am not merely good, Marcus, I am effective, and you are learning, slowly, but you are learning. He smiled wryly. I feel like a child being taught by a very tall, pointy-eared tutor. Liara's ears twitched in amusement. If you find learning humorous, perhaps it will be easier to accept the inevitable dominance I have over your domestic sphere. Marcus laughed despite himself. I think the inevitable dominance is already in place. As the day wound down, he reflected on the subtle, relentless shifts in their relationship. Liara's humor, cleverness, and alien ingenuity were eroding his sense of control, yet he found the process strangely compelling. Every joke, every gentle correction, every teasing flick of her ears reminded him that he was not the one shaping the household. Liara was. And yet he didn't feel defeated. He felt intrigued, challenged, and curiously alive. By the time he prepared for sleep, Marcus realized one undeniable truth. The alien maid assigned as his punishment had become the most fascinating and unpredictable element of his life. He didn't yet know if he would survive her lessons intact, but he was certain of one thing. His days were never going to be boring again. The morning began with an unusual calm, a deceptive quiet that Marcus had learned to distrust over the past weeks. Liara stood in the center of the apartment, arms folded, ears twitching just slightly as if sensing the tension he refused to admit existed. Today was inspection day. The Galactic Compliance Office had announced a surprise audit to evaluate the living standards of citizens in the Andromeda frontier, a test Marcus was fairly certain he would fail spectacularly if left to his own devices. Marcus, Liara said, voice calm, almost musical, you may wish to consider our approach carefully. Efficiency, presentation, and subtle improvisation are required. Failure is discouraged. Marcus tried to appear authoritative, puffing out his chest. Right, I've got this. I can handle a few inspectors. It's just people walking through the door and evaluating me. No problem. Liara tilted her head, ears flicking. The inspectors are trained to detect micro-irregularities in gravity distribution, cleanliness, nutrition, and even emotional equilibrium. I suggest you prepare accordingly. Marcus groaned, emotional equilibrium, really? Who cares about emotional equilibrium? Liara's eyes sparkled with amusement. Apparently, someone in the council cares and it happens to be part of the inspection. Shall we proceed? They set to work. Liara's strategies were subtle, almost imperceptible and thoroughly hilarious in execution. Floating cleaning drones zipped in formation, polishing surfaces that Marcus hadn't realized could even gather dust in zero gravity. The kitchen hummed with activity as levitating utensils performed synchronized routines, and the bioluminescent food emitted gentle, melodic chimes at intervals designed to impress rather than nourish. Marcus, attempting to follow instructions, ended up tripping over a hovering teacup and colliding with a floating chair, earning a small, suppressed chuckle from Liara. You seem very animated today, she said, ears flicking with subtle amusement. I'm not animated, he grunted. I'm physically expressive. By mid-morning, the inspectors arrived, their sleek hover uniforms glinting as they floated into the apartment. Marcus tried to maintain his composure, puffing up like a nervous hedgehog, while Liara greeted them with effortless charm, her ears articulating the tiniest gestures of politeness and subtle dominance. The inspector's initial scrutiny seemed harsh, but Liara anticipated every question, every hesitation, guiding Marcus with small nods and quiet hints that kept him just barely one step ahead of total embarrassment. One inspector floated toward Marcus, scanning a panel with blinking lights. Human Marcus, have you maintained your microgravitational calibration as per protocol? Marcus floundered, hands hovering uncertainly. Yes, I think. Liara placed a hand on the console, adjusting settings with a few precise gestures. The panel stabilized, lights aligning in perfect sequence, and Marcus's jaw dropped. Oh, right, yes, totally calibrated. The inspection continued with a mixture of subtle humor and alien ingenuity. A hovering dishcloth twirled like a baton, attracting the inspector's attention while concealing a minor flaw in the kitchen's humidity regulation. Floating objects danced in gentle choreographies designed to distract while showcasing efficiency. Marcus found himself laughing at the absurdity, the tension dissolving in the midst of chaos orchestrated by Liara. As the inspectors concluded their review, Marcus realized that he had been learning more than mere domestic efficiency. Liara's methods weren't just about control, they were lessons in patience, observation, and the delicate art of influence. He had begun to anticipate her adjustments, to notice the tiny signs, the flick of her ears, the subtle tilt of her head that hinted at her next intervention. In the process, he discovered something he hadn't expected. A growing admiration, a quiet respect for her intellect, creativity, and humor. The inspectors departed, their reports glowing with approval and occasional notes of bemused astonishment. Marcus slumped into a chair, laughing weakly. I can't believe we actually pulled that off. Liara's ears twitched in amusement. A partnership is most effective when the components recognize their respective strengths. You contributed sporadically but effectively. He groaned, sporadically, that sounds like a compliment from you. She inclined her head slightly. Consider it a measured compliment. You have adapted, growth is evident. Confidence is emerging, and you have learned the value of collaboration over authority. Marcus leaned back, watching her with a mixture of exhaustion and curiosity. You make it sound like I've changed for the better. Liara's smile was subtle, almost imperceptible, ears flicking in confirmation. Change is inevitable when one is guided by knowledge, wit, and occasionally levitating objects that refuse to obey. Over the following days, the dynamic between them shifted again, settling into a delicate equilibrium. Marcus no longer tried to assert dominance in the ways he had at the start. Instead, he learned to trust Liara's judgment, to anticipate her guidance, and even to enjoy the humorous interventions that had once embarrassed him. His home, once chaotic and disorganized, became a space of efficiency, curiosity, and understated elegance, all orchestrated by Liara's subtle hand. Yet their relationship was more than functional. There was humor, teasing, and quiet camaraderie. He noticed the way her ears twitched when she found something amusing, the way she prepared meals that delighted his senses, and the little gestures of care hidden beneath her cleverness. For her part, Liara seemed to enjoy his reactions, his stubborn attempts at control, and his occasional flashes of insight. It was a game of wit and influence, each moment threaded with laughter and intrigue. One evening, as Marcus floated in zero-G for a moment of relaxation, he reflected on his journey. He had started as a human begrudgingly assigned an alien maid as punishment. Now he realized he had been shaped by her influence, humbled, amused, and unexpectedly transformed. He could manage chaos more gracefully, anticipate consequences more thoughtfully, and most importantly, embrace unpredictability with curiosity rather than fear. Liara approached, holding a tray of softly glowing fruit spheres. "Marcus," she said, ears flicking in what he now recognized as a smile, "your growth is satisfactory, and I find our arrangement engaging." He accepted a sphere which floated gently into his hand. "Engaging, huh? I'd say it's been chaotic, funny, and instructive, and I guess I don't mind your dominance as much as I thought I would." Her ears twitched again, expressing what he had learned to recognize as amusement and perhaps satisfaction. "Dominance is only one aspect of our partnership. Mutual respect and